Welcome! Let's look at how to do explosions in Scratch. So as you can see, when these enemies get hit, they look like they break up in a cloud, a little explosion cloud. And I'm going to show you how I implemented that. Now, you can go onto, itch.io or OpenGameArt or something and find a sprite sheet full of different explosion animations and that sort of thing. But to be perfectly honest, you probably don't need to do that. A lot of popular indie games these days just use the sort of big circle approach to explosions, which actually looks fine in the context of a game. So what I've done to create the explosions here is I've actually made an explosion sprite. And the explosion sprite has a whole lot of costumes. I used to put the explosion animation after each enemy in their costumes, but it's just so much easier to have it as its own sprite. Then you don't have to worry about putting the explosions in the enemy costumes. So over here, as you can see, I have a number of now I would go with black and white circles, but because the background here is completely black, I wouldn't see the black circles. So I've made gray and white circles. And basically each frame, it's a bit hard to see here, but in each frame the circle is in a different place, so it jumps around a little bit. And then they get smaller, and then as we go along through all of the different costumes, they break up into multiple little different explosion-y particle things. I don't know what to call them. And I've sort of alternated between, gray, white, gray, white, gray, white, but you could go black, white, black, white, black, white. And that creates, when you zoom through them super quickly, it creates this explosion effect. That looks quite nice. So once you've got those costumes, and you can just draw those using a circle and filling them in with whatever color. That's fine. But yeah, the basic idea is alternate colors and go, put each one in a slightly different spot. I'll make the sizes change and that sort of thing, and generally getting smaller over time. So I've got 6 frames, and then let's have a look at the code. So basically, I'll move that out of the way. Basically what happens with me, and I'll just show you when an enemy gets hit. So when an enemy gets hit, so here's the bit where the enemy is getting hit. If it's touching the bullets, it creates a clone of the explosion. And I've also created 2 variables to tell the explosion where to occur on the screen. So, for example, if I just created a clone of explosion, then the explosion, when I start as a clone, it might appear in some random spot on the screen. We don't know where the explosion is. We need to tell it where to go. So when the enemy dies, it creates an explosion. So I've created 2 variables, explosion X and explosion Y, and I've just set that to the X position of the dying enemy. And then I've created a clone of explosion. Then over in the explosion script, I've said when I start as a clone, I play a sound. And if you want to know how to create explosion sounds in Scratch, I suggest you go look at that particular video in the polishing section, the sound effects. Then it goes to whatever it just got set to, explosion X and explosion Y. Then it changes its costume to costume 1, which was this one up here. And then it finally shows itself, and then repeats 5 times, goes to the next costume. Now, depending on how many costumes you have, I have 6 costumes, but if we start on costume 1, it only needs to go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Through 5 of them, it'll be back to the last one, down to the last one. And then, very, very important that we delete the explosion clone. Otherwise, our game will eventually not do explosions anymore, because it will run into the 300 clone limit, and our game will probably get very laggy as well. So there is one problem with all of this, and the problem is that say that there were 2 explosions in one frame, which is quite unlikely, but let's say there were 2 explosions in one frame. Then this explosion X and explosion Y would be set by the first enemy that's exploding. Then this explosion X and Y would be set by the second enemy. and then both explosions would end up happening in the same place, and one enemy would die without an explosion, on the rare occasion that it happened on the same frame. There are ways we could fix that, but by using lists and things like that, but I think it's not really worth it in this case. I think it's, if occasionally, in 1 in 1,000 chance that an enemy doesn't explode, then that's fine. All right, let's just add one more element to this, which I think would work really well. So I'm going to add a screen shake, and there's another video and another section for that. So go and have a look at the screen shake section to see how to implement it. But if you've looked at the screen shake section, I'm just going to say when the explosion clone starts, it's going to set a random value for how big the screen shake is going to be, and then it's going to broadcast screen shake. And hopefully that'll work. I haven't tested this, so okay. So we had a little screen shake there. I'll make this bigger. Okay, we had a bigger screen shake there. So hopefully you can see we've got explosions, we've got screen shake. They go really, really well together. And I just want to wait until I have a string of... Whoa, okay. So you can see, like, even without a good explosion, just using circles, I think it just looks fine. But again, you can find, some proper images of explosions and put them in here as well. That would be fine.